To take us through this panel, allow me to introduce our moderator for the session, that is Miss Brenda Kerubo. And maybe guys, just a round of applause for her as she takes up the stage. She is a business broadcast journalist covering markets, corporate finance, and day-to-day happenings of business-related matters across Africa. She has interviewed global figures, including former Prime Minister of Belgium and the current President of the European Council, Charles Michel. She holds a financial journalism certificate from Strathmore Business School. Guys, give it up for her one more time. Brenda, I'm throwing it to you to take it over.
All right, here we go. Thank you so much, Laurette. It's always a pleasure being here again for another session. And this time, of course, we are going to discuss capital markets. And we have an A-star panel that I'm going to introduce even as they come onto the stage. We have Justice Angoli. He is the Product Development and Uptake Manager at the Capital Markets Authority. A round of applause, please, even as he comes on stage. Let's give him a big clap. Karibu sana. We have Peter Wayaki. He is a partner at Mboya Wangongu Wayaki and Wayaki Advocates. Peter, of course, will be discussing the provisions in the law when it comes to funding. Welcome to the stage, Peter. We also have Amish Gupta. He is the Vice Chairman of the Kenya Association of Stockbrokers and Investment Banks. Welcome, Amish. And we have finally Moses Nyabila. He is the Business Enabling Environment Advisor at USAID's Kenya Investment Mechanism. Welcome. Okay, so a big hand clap, of course, to our panelists, even as we start this conversation. A round of applause, please. Okay, so yesterday we had a lot of discussions as well as today in relation to financing. And I think most stakeholders in the room want to know how they can go about financing and what are the available solutions. So to begin with, we did see the credit guarantee scheme, which we had a discussion from the Treasury representative a little bit earlier. And also yesterday we had the financial institutions, specifically the commercial banks. But today we have specialists in relation to share capital, or what you would like to call equity. So to begin with, maybe I can get just a brief in relation to where we are when it comes to share capital in the country, briefly from each and every representative. I'd like to start with you, Amish. Welcome.
Thank you. We discussed crowdfunding, and the draft crowdfunding bill, crowdfunding draft that's currently in the works, allows for startups, micro and small enterprises to raise capital under the capital markets framework. Subject to the final legal legislation on this, micro enterprises will be able to raise capital up to 25 million shillings. Small will be able to raise capital to 50 million shillings, and medium will be able to raise capital to 100 million shillings. It gives you the kind of scale that we are looking at to tap into that particular space. So that method of raising equity capital is supposed to be efficient and effective for enterprises. In the new draft that is also going to be discussed on the new framework, we have something called the EIPO. And the EIPO is supposed to be an electronic platform around how the method of raising equity capital using that particular mode can raise equity capital very efficiently and very quickly using an electronic method. And we're hoping that some stakeholders will go live, in the near future. For the agri sector, let me just make a point that out of 2.9 trillion shillings that is lent by the banking sector as domestic credit, only 91 billion is lent to the agricultural sector, which is only 3%, although the agricultural sector represents more than 30+% of the GDP. I think the discussion around the way forward on agricultural sector is for national associations to lobby on the startup bill that's going through Parliament at the moment. And on top of that is to look at regulatory framework that requires commercial banks to increase their lending to the agricultural sector as a minimum. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Amish. And Justice, could you please add on that as well?
Yeah, thank you so much. First of all, I should indicate that we are happy to be here representing CMA. I will just start my conversation by asking a few questions to the audience. First of all, how many here have a piece of land? Please raise up your hand. You have a piece of land you bought? You can see the numbers are good. How many here have an account that has bought some shares? Raise up your hand high, please. Hey, 2 or 3 people. Yeah, so clearly there's a challenge of awareness on what capital markets are about. I know that we have had a lot of discussion around the banking sector and what banks have been able to do. So capital markets are providing an alternative to raising financing to what banks can do. And at capital markets, what we do is to regulate that space so that if one is interested in raising capital to support their operations, then capital markets would be the alternative to come to if you get lost when you get to a bank. I'm not trying to say that you can't go, you shouldn't be going to the banking sector, but we are providing an alternative. And that alternative is there for you to utilize, so long as you seek the information you require, you discuss with us, we are there to regulate it, it's disciplined, there's a lot of integrity we are emphasizing, you're welcome, we can have a chat.
All right, thank you so much, Justice. Peter?
Yep. Just to clarify, to add what my colleagues have said, is really the distinction between capital, as you can find in the capital markets, and other forms of funding. Basically, the difference between capital markets and the banks or other providers of credit is that with capital markets, you get money which is patient, which you do not have to pay back, because what you share is ownership and risk. And that's a distinction between equity and debt. In the case of debt, you get money which you do need to pay interest a lot of time and also to pay the principal, which means you must find that money and pay it back. And the person that lent you the money is not taking a risk on your business as such. They will not share your losses with you. They want their money back at some point as agreed. On the other hand, equity is saying, I have this business, I've been looking after it, it has grown to this level, would you come and share its ownership with me by you putting money into this business, money which we both now, I risk what I've already put in, you risk what you're now putting in. If we make money, we shall share the profits. If we make losses, we shall find another way of making money in future. That is a distinction, and that's what capital markets offers. When you hear of listing and things like that, they're just complicated ways of saying somebody's coming in. Let me give you an example. A few people put up their hands when my colleague here asked who has a central depository account with some shares. And a few put up their hands, and what that means is you have put your money to share with other co-owners. Let's take the example of Safaricom. You are sharing with other co-owners of Safaricom the risk of ownership of Safaricom. You don't even know the other people, but they are there, about 200,000 of them. And that's what capital markets does. It brings people who do not even necessarily know one another to share risk in a business and to share the outcome of their business through profits which are distributed as dividends. Thank you, Brenda.
Thank you so much, Peter. And Moses, finally, the role of USAID's Kenya Investment Mechanism.
Yes, thank you very much. Well, we've been talking about capital mobilization since yesterday, so we have heard how we've worked with financial institutions to lend more to businesses, including SMEs. The other part of what we do is work with government on matters enabling environment, which is critical. And I think, was it Wangare who was talking about business and government? And she gave an example of Nigeria. Now, in Nigeria, there's a say that business grows at night when the government is asleep. So what, what that means primarily is that businesses swim upstream against government. So when government is asleep, at least the river is quiet, the businesses can swim. So we've seen a bit of that, but again, with a lot of work around the e-citizen and whatnot, it's becoming much easier to do business with government. So really, our work, and mine particularly, is to work with government to change that so that we swim in the same direction with businesses and then they can move faster. Because again, this economy needs to grow at around 10% for us to achieve the kind of middle income economy we are looking for. So that's critical. So our work primarily is policy, but policy that impacts financing, especially for agriculture. So that means working with the county governments. We train and capacity build, especially the people who are investment facing. And then we also work on matters policy reforms. And this conversation with CMA is really about policy reforms. So that's really critical. I'll be happy to add more, but the ag sector really needs a lot of financing. I can give more details later. Thank you.
Thank you, Moses. Amish, for a business to be not really successful, but to diversify its sources of funding, we have to have debt and equity. And there's actually a percentage to that. Now, however, looking at an SME, when I'm thinking about debt, I have to worry about collateral. When I'm looking at share capital, I have to worry about someone else coming into my business and in some cases may actually run it to a certain extent, depending with which investor is coming on board. Talk to us a little bit about this and why so many small, medium-sized enterprises are shying away from giving a share of their business.
The crux of the matter is whether these shareholders of SMEs wish to continue to control 100% of their companies, but rely on debt and internal generated cash flows in order to sustain and grow their businesses. With interest rates high, with the kind of risks that are in the environment, we saw 1.7 trillion shillings worth of loans in the commercial banking segment restructured, which was equivalent to 57% of the total gross loans. 300,000 businesses were affected. The non-performing loans in the banking sector is an extremely high amount as a percentage of the total gross loans. There are some SMEs that would wish to take those risks and go that direction. But the reality is that those restructurings would not have happened if those balance sheets had equity capital, which we call share capital, which we call shock absorber capital. I challenge any of you to drive your vehicles without shock absorbers. As a result, the decision that has to be taken by shareholders of SMEs going forward is to own less than 100% of their businesses, but of a bigger entity that has higher equity value. At the end of the day, the entire mechanism for in business is to grow shareholder value. And therefore, owning a lower percentage of a higher equity value means those controlling shareholders actually own much more in value than they would have if they had 100% of their company with debt. Because we investment bankers would be able to guide and advise on the equity value of that business with debt and without debt. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Round of applause for Amish. Very, very nice data when it comes to listings. Justice, how are you making it easier for small, medium-sized enterprises to list at the Nairobi Securities Exchange?
Yeah, thank you, Brenda. Now, I just wanted to mention two things. First, see, when you invest, or as an SME, when you go out to raise capital, and I can give you a comparison between going to a bank and using capital markets. Number one, if, for example, you're raising capital through a bond, if you go to a bank, you are going to be required to produce a collateral. Okay? So without a collateral, your discussion will not go far. Number two, if you are lucky and you're given that loan, your repayment is going to start the next month, both the interest and the principal amount that you borrowed. Now, in the case of capital markets, we do not emphasize on a collateral. So if you're borrowing through capital markets, the only thing you require is to put together documentation that details exactly what you're going to do with the money you're borrowing and exactly how you're going to be repaying, what the risks are you're going to face, and what your governance structures will be. Once CMA as a regulator is satisfied that the information you provided is satisfactory, then it enables you to raise capital from the public, using that documentation we talked about as the basis on which you're going to borrow. Now, if you access that loan, the repayments are such that you will repay the interest amount only in the first period. Say if it's a 3-year instrument you've used, you will repay the interest amount during the first 2.5 years. On the last time when you're supposed to repay, then you repay the interest plus the principal amount you had borrowed. So it gives you a bit of grace, a grace period for you to prepare yourself so that you don't start repaying immediately after you have borrowed. Now let me go back to a bit of equity. Now the advantage with equity, and I think Brenda you mentioned this and asked why would one want to shed some of their shareholding to people who are coming in who may not be party to the person who started the company and the suffering went through or she went through when they were forming the company. The advantage with opening up shareholding to other shareholders is such that you now enable the company to expand. Now imagine, for example, if Safaricom said, we are not going to bring in more shareholders. It means that the capital that you'll be accessing will be limited. So capital markets are there to enable you to expand beyond a certain limit. And for capital markets, even as we speak, there is no company that is too small to come to capital markets. Yeah, what you just need to do is to present your case and provide the facts as they are. And so long as CMA we are satisfied with what you have provided as information, then we will enable you to raise the capital you require. So ultimately, I think there's a bit of fear and a lack of information as to how everything goes. And so long as you have a bit of knowledge, then it will be easy for you to access capital markets. I just wanted to conclude by saying, they say that you cannot do the same thing the same way and expect a different result. We have tried with other institutions, including banks, to raise capital to support our operations as SMEs, and it has failed so far. So why can't we try something new and see how far we'll go? Yeah.
Thank you so much. Round of applause for Justice. Peter, this is where you come in when it comes to provisions in the law. Let's say I'm a micro, small, medium-sized enterprise. I've finally made the decision that I'm going to list a part of my company at the Nairobi Securities Exchange. My company has its vision, it has its purpose, and a set of objectives. Now, however, this investor comes in, puts in a lot of money, takes a certain part of the controlling structure. At some point, the shareholder tries to move away from the vision or objective of the company that it was intended to do. What are some of the provisions in the law to protect me? Because these are some of the concerns that small, medium-sized enterprises have. we won't share the same objective. You'll come on board and take over. This was not my purpose for setting up the company. How am I protected by the law as it is at the moment?
Very well, thank you. I think that first of all is to begin by saying when you talk about objectives of a company or of a business, they ought to be business objectives. They can very well be social objectives, impact objectives. For example, you're saying, yes, I'd like to make some profit, but at the same time, I'd like to have a positive impact to my society, for example. So if that is clear, when you are inviting people or a person to come into your business, that needs to be documented. Ideally, it should be documented in the Articles of Association, if it's fundamental, or it can actually be documented in an agreement when they're coming in, so that everybody is clear, this is what this business stands for. Now, if you sell your business, majority, as Brenda has said, a majority of it, they are actually what are called minority protection rights, which is in your agreement of them coming in, you're able to say, for us to change the following important aspects of the business, then the minority must have a say. Generally, companies are run on a majority basis. The majority have their way. The minority protection rights are there to ensure the minority is not overrun. And that's when you decide what is important for us. Is it the change of name? For example, you might say, for me, whatever happens to the business, I don't want this name to change. Protect the change of name. Is it the area of operation? I want this to work in the slums, for example, because that's where I want to have impact, or that's where my business comes from. Protect that aspect from being changed. So there are legal mechanisms that can be used to protect. However, having said that, you also cannot sell a majority of your business and expect to continue having a majority of the decisions. There's also some democracy in companies, and that needs to. But I've got to say, everything I've said here is mainly about private transactions. You know, minority protection, shareholders agreements, and so on and so on. When it comes to the public market, which is the capital markets, there are rules about how are decisions in a company made. Largely, there'll be 50%. In special decisions, there are 75%. In other decisions, there may be 100%. In other decisions, there may be a good percentage, provided this number does not object. And that protects even people who may be 10%. There are some decisions that cannot be made if more than 10%, or if the 10% objects. So it can be structured, and I've got to say, at Mboya Wangonga Noyaki, we specialize in providing legal solutions to businesses of every size. And we are some of the people you need to talk to as we go along.
Thank you so much, Peter. Very, very insightful. I didn't even know about those aspects, minority and majority shareholders. Very interesting. Moses, talk to us a little bit about the enabling environment. How exactly can we make it simpler, especially for micro, small, medium-sized enterprises? Is it the fact that we also need to impact them with the knowledge, with the how-to?
Enabling is, business is really a partnership with government, even when government is not a shareholder. Remember, government takes 30% or so, or more of your profits if you include VAT and other things. So the government is a shareholder even when they don't hold shares. And they're the ones that give license to operate. So it's very critical that the government swims in the same direction. So in addition to laws and regulations and all the things that government does, is that a lot of those things need to be implemented, and they need to be friendly. So again, it goes beyond just creating a law and putting it on the shelf. So it needs to be interpreted for businesses. So this is where we also come in and work with government and especially the county governments in terms of translating that into business language, and then getting businesses, people to tap into, for example, tax incentives. If government is, for example, putting up industrial infrastructure and they would like, for example, banks to finance those, this is where we come in to support implementation because without implementation, we cannot go anywhere. So that's critical as part of enabling environment. So that's, and besides that, of course, we will be talking about BASFs and what they do, intermediating between banks and businesses. And government also comes in with credit guarantee schemes you've had. So all these things add up to create the enabling environment. So enabling environment is not just one part. It ties everything together. Thank you.
So Moses, are you seeing an interest when you're talking to these micro, small, medium-sized enterprises? Do they have an interest in terms of getting into listing their shares when you're advising them? What do they ask? What are some of the questions they ask?
Absolutely. I mean, in my previous life, I've worked with especially the cooperative sector in the dairy industry and others. And there's quite a bit of companies that have been set up in that space that needs price discovery. They've reached a point where they cannot grow without additional expertise, without additional capital. So how do they move from that point where they've leveled off? So really, the coming of this, the change of regulations and opening up of the capital markets is going to be very critical. And once you do price discovery, then obviously you discover that a company that you thought was worth probably 500 million suddenly is a 1 or 2 billion shilling company. Now with that kind of valuation, you can go back to the market and borrow, and you can do a lot more. And our companies need to grow because we need to just not serve Kenya. We need to serve East Africa. We have Congo and other places that they need to move into. They can't move into those places with loans. They need to then tap into the capital market. The last thing I want to say is that when you open up to capital markets and you bring in strategic partners and you bring in technology transfer from other countries, because we can also match enterprises from Kenya with an enterprise from another place. This is how Safaricom was created. You actually begin to grow our economy, and our economy needs new thinking, new people, expertise that can really turbocharge it forward. So really this work we are doing with CMA is very critical, and perhaps Peter will talk about how that has happened. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Moses. Need one question from the audience, just one.
Hi, my name is Sid Ali. I'm a research and innovation specialist for a Dutch-based organization dealing with sustainability. Since the conversation is about creating an enabling environment for businesses to thrive, I was thinking the role the financial sector is taking into research and development. There is a new study that shows that countries that spend a huge amount of their GDP in R&D are really performing. And then there's also the aspect of how do you make this information public to these SMEs. Let me give you an example with this brilliant young gentleman. He had a manufacturing enterprise, and he is hindered with the technical knowledge of the recipe or the content of that, which is a very critical, the quality. How is the financial institution investing maybe in brought up institution where they can do research on agro-processing? That young man comes and gets that information. The effect it will have, it's in your interest in two ways. Number one, if he can get that knowledge and he secures a market abroad, he always needs a bank to put that money. He will come to you. Number one.
We are not a bank.
No, I'm talking about just...
we are capital markets.
Yes.
So what's your question?
My question is, for example, you are a capital market. If he performs well, you will invest in him. And if his company is performing well and exporting huge amount of product, you will get profit, right?
So I'm happy to answer that.
Yes.
It may not be the capital markets, but well, there's Kirdi, for example,
Yes.
that can support the kind of research that you're talking about.
Yes.
If you go to the University of Nairobi, the Department of Food Science, definitely you'll get all the support you need. You can also go to JKUAT, so there are quite a number of institutions that will be able to help with that, and I'm happy to link him up. There are also the likes of Calro, which also does a lot of this work. So I'm happy to link him up with the ecosystem.
All right, thank you so much. Okay, so Justus, let's talk a little bit about product development, because you know CMA is also adapting to the environment and also the new ways of doing business. Talk to us about the new products that are in the offering, and at the same time also touch on green financing.
Thank you. Just to respond a bit to what you had asked earlier around what CMA is doing insofar as providing an enabling environment for SMEs. Number one, we host SME forums on an annual basis, once in a year. We can share the contacts. If you're interested, you can be participating, so that if you have a new idea that could help SMEs grow through capital markets, we'll be more than ready to support. Just to also respond to that gentleman, we have what we call a sandbox environment at CMA, where you are enabled to test your ideas if they are relevant to capital markets, and if those ideas succeed, then they can be rolled out to the wider market or country, right? So that feedback, I think, would be relevant. I also wanted to add that for SMEs, we are currently reviewing our framework, because we realized our plan to have SMEs participate in capital markets has not yielded what we had anticipated. So we have already reviewed our framework to reduce certain stringent, what I can call stringent measures that we had to encourage those. I think there's a bit of mic issues here, but it's okay, it's coming up. So in order to enable SMEs to participate in our market, we have provided that avenue. Thanks, Peter. And so at the end of it all, what we are saying is we are standing ready to welcome you to capital markets. If you have any ideas on raising capital, on getting a bit more knowledge on exactly how capital markets work, we can avail the information you require to enable you to go to the next step. Just to also answer on green financing and what capital markets are doing, you realize that there's a lot more focus now on issues governance, issues environment. And for capital markets, what we're looking at is what instruments are available that can become as midwives of enabling those who are seeking funds to take advantage of those instruments we have in the capital markets to be able to support the environment. So we have what we call green bonds. We also have projects that are supported by capital markets that are green. In fact, we have one issue in our market known as Econ, who have raised funds from the capital market to construct houses that are aligned to being green, say using solar, recycling of water, and ensuring that ultimately a lot less energy is used than should be necessary to support their operations, even as they contribute to bettering our environment. Overall, for capital markets, from where we stand, even the regulations that we are speaking about, that we are currently reviewing, there are provisions in there that have a bias towards supporting green finance. The details are in there, and we can share some of those provisions for you to look at. And if there are any suggestions on exactly how we can better the same, we always stand ready to provide that support.
All right, thank you so much. Amish, there are some small, medium-sized enterprises that are willing to actually list on the Nairobi Securities Exchange. But now I have a fight to pick with the investors. If you look at the stock market at the moment, Majority of the financing goes to the 5 biggest counters. Goes to the East African breweries, goes to Kenya Commercial Bank, you know, the darlings of the stock market. Why is it that it's so difficult for these investors to put money into small, medium-sized enterprises?
That was the past, and that is history. What we are focusing now is the future. And I have spoken around a financial revolution that is on its way. There is primary market and there is secondary market. For SMEs, the most important critical matter is share capital on their balance sheets so that they can grow and sustain their businesses. As we go forward, crowdfunding, EIPO are going to be important methods for these SMEs to raise capital up to 100 million shillings. For any SME to raise up to 100 million shillings, they need to be a bankable SME. Now, once the primary market or the primary issue is done, and let me tell you this, there is huge pools of capital amongst the retail investors in Kenya today. It is the lack of products and it is the lack of opportunities that have not been given to them because of the lack of the regulatory environment and because of the lack of the specific product like EIPO to be able to do that. As a result, once these primary market issues are done successfully, subsequently there is a secondary market, the need for a secondary market. At one of our exchanges today, they have multiple products. They have the unquoted securities platform, which is a new product. They have other products that can allow secondary trading. With the new framework, there is a specific segments that are being drafted for SMEs now. The SME equity segment and the SME fixed income segment. As a result, the eligibility criteria requirements for these 2 new segments have been dropped and made much more simple, efficient, and effective to access those 2 new segments going forward. As a result, once the legislation is in place and once specific stakeholders stand up,
Are you having conversations with small, medium-sized enterprises in terms of showing interest? Are they asking more in terms of what they need to do compared to, let's say, 3 or 4 years ago? Are they showing interest in relation to share capital?
Yes, the answer is that more and more businesses are asking about how they can raise capital, including through equity. But it's also true that not enough of the smaller businesses are asking those questions. And part of this is perhaps we sometimes talk above people's heads when we are talking about capital markets, about capital raising. We use big words, we use jargon, and it's time to simplify these things. And simply to say that when we talk about equity, we are saying, are you prepared to expand your business, make your cake bigger, in the process get somebody else to put in their money there so that together you can grow the cake and share the result. That is purely what it is to raise capital. People also need to understand the various mechanisms and the regulations that we've been doing with the Capital Markets Authority and with the Kenya Investment Management mechanisms, USAID, KIM, have been trying to simplify this. And one of the things that I need to point out in the new regulations is a clarity around private offers. There's been a bit of confusion in the market about if I go to the public or to some section of the public and raise some money, does that mean I must also therefore go to the Nairobi Securities Exchange immediately? And you can feel too small because, as you mentioned, when you look at the Nairobi Securities Exchange, who you see is East African Breweries, BAT, Safaricom, and other giants. And you see yourself, as somebody recorded elsewhere, as a grasshopper in their own eyes, in the eyes of giants. Now, you needn't do that. There is a process where you can actually approach a number of people, preferably, in fact, known to you, and structure that so that you're saying to friends and relatives and former schoolmates whose number you have in your phone book, can we put some money together? And you'd be guided on how many can you reach, what do you need to do, how do you protect yourself from breaking the rules, and that is how you raise capital at the first level, from friends, relatives, and people you know. People whose phone number you have, people whose email you have. That's at the level of private offers. Then you can have what is called a restricted public offer. Again, there are people in this market or in this country whose business is to actually invest in suitable businesses. They're just looking for where can I find a good business to put in some money, support it to grow, and ultimately share in it. And those people are there. That's part of why we have people like the Capital Markets Authority, we have investment bankers, we have private equity funds, we have venture capitalists who are looking for suitable business. Now, you ask, do people come to us and ask for capital? Yes, they do. But you also have other people who come to us and say, where can I find a good business to put my money into? When they say a good business, what do they say? A business with prospects, a business which is being managed well, a business where the owner knows there's a difference between them and the business, a business which preferably keeps records and distinguishes receipts from expenses, a business that is not overly intertwined, or who are prepared to be assisted to do that separation. So yes, there's a lot of interaction. It's not enough. And as Amisha said, there's a lot of lack of suitable businesses, or businesses which are investor ready. And part of what we do as lawyers, as investment banks, is to assist businesses to become investor ready and introduce them to people who might be interested in investing in those businesses. So that there's actually what in economics they call a double coincidence of wants. I want money and somebody wants an investment opportunity.
All right. Thank you so much, Peter. Moses, I know that's also an area that the Kenya investment mechanism is also, playing critically. Talk to us a little bit about that.
Yes, we've begun conversation with CMA and stakeholders in terms of after the regulations, what happens. So part of what we're looking at is to work on, creating the list of enterprises, close to probably 1,000 plus, that will have access to advisors and then being assisted with templated articles and others so that they prepare themselves for investors. So then those are matched with crowdfunding and we should be able to get investment. So again, creating that pipeline of businesses and getting them outside of Nairobi, to the regions. So you have those lists in Western Kenya, at the coast. So all those will create a pipeline of businesses that are exposed to the kind of expertise that we are talking about here, which when linked with BASPs and talking about where Kim goes next, all these business advisors should be able to get something to do with more enterprises. So really this is the future that Amish is talking about, which is a future of revolution. So that's critical. I think the last thing I want to say is, if you look at, for example, the cooperative sector, the dairy cooperative, for example, you'll be surprised that Meru Central today is the number 2 dairy processor after Brookside. And that is because it's owned by 50,000 farmers who are investors. So that is to tell you, even small farmers who have 2-3 cows can actually invest in a giant. And that giant now has beaten KCC, just to tell you that why government should not get into the business of running businesses. And that's part of creating the enabling environment that we're talking about. Thank you.
Round of applause, Moses. Thank you so much. Moses, I want to stay with you. When it comes to counties, when you're doing these advisory services, on the ground, is financial literacy a key concern, like what Peter talked about a little bit earlier? Is it very difficult for farms to distinguish themselves from this is a business and this is me?
Yes, business is a science. So obviously, if you're not literate, then you'll struggle, unless you're doing a very simple mom and pop shop. But the rest, you have to keep records. So literacy is important, and not just literacy as we know it, what we call financial literacy, which is possible, by the way. Sometimes you may not know how to write, but you're more financially literate than a university graduate. That we've seen with the number of enterprises. So I think that's critical, obviously. Cooperative sector is very good at mobilizing people and then bringing talent back to rural areas. And with a cooperative like that, then you find thousands of farmers are able to benefit from a company that's been created that is a social enterprise that then links with enterprise. Remember, the ultimate MSME is actually the farmer. Now, if you have 50,000 of them owning a factory and that factory is able to work with banks as SACCO, and SACCO is able to bring financial support, financial lending to farmers at wholesale, it's really the ultimate ways of unlocking rural areas. So there are many ways of farmers doing things at their level and creating major giants that overcomes issues of illiteracy and others, and cooperative sector is one of them. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Do you have a question from the audience? One question. Oh, okay, we have one right at the back. Keep it very, very
All
short.
right. As I picked this question, there's also another one perhaps from the digital side, the virtual side. And it's mostly just a follow-up question to what Amish had said earlier, that for SMEs to list in capital markets, they have to be bankable. So the question that follows up this statement is, can Amish provide some minimum requirements for a small and medium enterprise to list at the capital markets? I hope you've been able to get that. I'll give the gentleman right here to share his question as well.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Wangalwa Musa, project advisor for GIZ Global Project, Built for Skills. My question is quite simple, and I appreciate the fabric of panelists we have. And if I would have allowed, I would really have loved to hear what they would respond, each of them. It has been mentioned by one of them that we need to simplify the jargon we use, especially in this space. So for the interest of the SMEs in this forum, physical or digital, we've talked about them being investor ready. So what is this investor readiness?
There are certain basic documentation that is required by experts in order to establish whether this business can go and raise capital. Basic documents. And what you'll find is that most of the time this basic documentation is not available, or when it is checked or tested, it is weak and unsatisfactory. So it's not difficult to prepare 25 pieces of basic documentation if you're running a business that is planning to raise up to 25 million shillings, up to 50 million shillings, or up to 100 million shillings. As a result, BASPs are playing an important role in preparing these 25 documents, so that by the time they come to other experts who specialize in actually raising the capital to prepare a document called a prospectus, which is 100 pages plus, and binding and legal on the directors and the shareholders of that company, the time period between the 25 documentation and the prospectus and the capital raise should not take more than 90 days. Therefore, get BASPs to assist in creating very basic 25 pieces of documentation. Thank you.
So in terms of the minimum requirements one needs to meet before they can consider themselves to come to capital markets, you need a minimum capital base of 10 million Kenya shillings. You need to brush up your governance structures so that then there is an inclusion of some independent director in your organization, so that in case there are any issues, this independent director, it's assumed, would provide the advice you require in order for you not to be biased, such that you can run down the company. There are documents required. Amish has talked about an information memorandum, which summarizes all about your company and what it does, the risks it could face, the possible pricing per share of a share of the SME. You know, all the information that you consider necessary to help an investor make a decision on whether or not they should invest in your SME. That information should be in that document. The document is the one you submit to CMA for evaluation together with the NSE, the Nairobi Securities Exchange. And once they are okay, then you'll be given the go-ahead to raise capital. There is no limit as to how much you can raise, so long as it is an amount that you can be able to absorb. Yeah? Then the last one is you need to be a company because, again, you need to be priced. So you need to have a limited number of shares that would enable somebody to say a share price per share would be this much. Now, if you look at our exchange, we have around 64 companies that are listed. Each of them has gone through that process. And it's a fairly straightforward process, especially if you understand it. And as CMA, we will be more than ready to assist you together with the transaction advisors and a team from the intermediaries, investment bankers, including Amicia. They can provide that support. Now back to what we mean by investor readiness. See, when you're investing in other markets, for example, if you're buying land, there is capital gains tax. In capital markets, if you buy shares, there is no tax to it if you sell them at a price that is higher than the price you bought at. So we don't have capital gains tax in capital markets, and that is to motivate investors to come to our capital markets. There's also enabling technology, and in that we have platforms that you can use in order to invest. And we can share more information in case you require after this session. Then lastly, again, the minimum amount you require to invest in our capital market depends on the company you're investing in. You can actually use as little as 100 shillings to invest in our capital market. So that perception that it's an elitist market that is for what I can call big boys is a misnomer. Yeah, I would want to end it there.
Thank you so much. And Peter, yes, Peter, would you briefly walk us through just some of the key jargon for the share capital that a small, medium-sized enterprises needs to be familiar with? Just 5 key ones, because we are very short on time.
I think I've been trying to, it's just as... Very well. I think one of the things just before I get to the question is to ask a question to the audience. If you've been working on this SME and you've been growing it, it's come from being small, now it's medium, or it's come from being micro, it's now small and growing to medium, you spent everything you've had in the last 10 years. At your last calculation, you think you spent something like 50 million maybe, or 25 to 50 million, and you put everything you had. You sold things, you sold plots of land and and so on. But now you know it's worth about 50 million. At least that's what you put in. You have a need for 10 million shillings. How do you get the 10 million shillings? Not for the business, but for yourself. You probably want to buy yourself a flat which is so being sold out there. And you're saying, I need a place to stay. My business is worth 50 million shillings. I only need 10. Where do I get the 10? You go to the bank, you can borrow 10 and pay 18% plus 2% arrangement fees. You don't have the cash flow to be able to pay it back, but you're a rich person. You're worth 50 million in your business. You've invested blood, sweat, and tears over the last many years. And that's where capital markets comes in, that it creates an exit mechanism for investors. And for some people, the level at which they need the exit mechanism, their businesses are worth 1 billion, 500 million, 250 million, but it's stuck there because their salary does not give them that much. They need a lump sum. A key thing about the capital markets is the ability to sell a portion when you want to and possibly buy back when you want to. Liquidity. That's what is called liquidity. That is what is called an exit mechanism. And the key thing that the capital markets provides is the exit, is a potential for exit, partial or fully. It also provides liquidity. Liquidity meaning I can go in, I can go out, I can decide to sell 1,000 shares and go for a holiday, for example. That's all I need. But if I own the business, I couldn't otherwise get 1 million shillings out of it. So I think I've got two jargon points, liquidity and exit mechanism. Equity, I think I already clarified what equity is. It's really ownership of the business, which can be shared, and it's split into shares. Most of you probably are already in companies, so you already know what share capital is. And really, share capital is a share of ownership. You can own all of it, but it will be broken down into a number of shares worth so much each. And that's a share capital. When you are selling out or you are listing, it's some of those units that you sell. Prospectus is just a document, a selling document. It's a document you prepare to tell potential investors, this is what my company is about. This is what I'm offering. Would you be interested? If they're interested, they'll buy. If they're not, they'll not buy. I think investor readiness has been mentioned, and we could have a discussion after this. I can see you running.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Peter. And even as we finish in 2 minutes, Moses, is Kenya getting there when you benchmark with other, developed markets in Africa, like South Africa and Nigeria, in terms of SMEs developing interests in share capital? Are we getting there?
Yes, we should be getting there. I mean, we have M-Pesa, we have platforms that a lot of countries don't have. So really, I think what's left is to use that platform. A few numbers I want you to remember is that last year, young men and women spent 250 billion shillings gambling. So that money could, with crowd funding and all this platform, it should be converted into capital. And gambling is not something you're lending someone. We spent only 70 billion shillings on farm inputs, to give you an idea. So we invest more in the other things. And then the government is owed 385 billion by government enterprises that can actually tap into the market. So really what we are creating is opportunity for even government. Instead of giving money to enterprises, they should be able to get money from enterprises. So really this is what this platform is about. For my farmers, it's really exciting times. We'll get money to support inputs and to grow the rural economies. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, Moses Nyabila, Business Enabling Environment Advisor, USAID Kenya Investment Mechanism, Justus Agoti, Product Development and Uptake Manager at the Capital Markets Authority, and Peter Wayaki, Partner at Mboya, Wangongu and Wayaki Advocates, and of course, Amish Gupta, Kenya Association of Stockbrokers and Investment Banks. He is the Vice Chairman. And I've been your host, Brenda Kerubo. Thank you so much for staying tuned into this session. Thank you.
Allow me to check up on how the audience is doing. Of that session, Leona, I mean, you can give me this interlude, at least any of you from the panel. How are you feeling? Probably any key highlights that stands out for you for the day?
Thank you, Kevin. No, I think it was an interesting panel. Getting to hear some of the regulatory changes that are in the works. The crowdfunding draft bill. I think that's something that will be interesting to track.
Mr. Mshiri, we'll have some money for any SME youth bits, so probably maybe that's what's been mentioned. I would like to seek your clarity so that we come to ask you for money. Tell us what we can get from you.
Okay, thank you very much for that. I think under the Chamber of Commerce, our main role is to support MSMEs, and our particular focus right now is young people. So we've created an ecosystem where young people can be able to find support, come together and engage with other businesses, and find value chains that they can be able to engage in. We have partnered with various other organizations. We've been able to disperse, especially during this period of COVID, interest-free as well as collateral-free funds to support our existing members through this period of COVID. So you're free to visit our offices and see how we can be able to work together this journey of business.
Thank you. Where is your office?
We have several offices. Our headquarters is in Heriton House, opposite DOD, but we also have county offices. Every single county in the country, you'll be able to find our offices there.
Okay, thank you.
Please visit our website.
All right.
Good afternoon, I suppose.
Good afternoon.
My name is Amelia Veen, and I'm from Scribe Services. We are a company secretary firm, and I noted from the CMA, he spoke about funding, and he talked about the shares and everything. To be a member, I know there are some requirements on corporate governance compliance, and we at Scribe Services, we assist companies to comply with the requirements of both CMA and other regulations that you may require to access, to be able to be listed or to actually just comply with good governance. We also assist in the ESG reporting line, which is something that is currently now a requirement. And we also assist in immigration support.
My name is Oscar Nyona. I am founder of Swaso Consultancy Services. I just want to comment about the presentation that have been done. The CMA, the capital market have really talked about how we can access funding from SMEs can access funding. Now, she has given an example of where the offices are for those who can access in Nairobi. I come from the rural area. I am a BSP from Homa Bay. Now, for my SME who is willing to access this kind of funding from Homa Bay, from Busia, and maybe even from Mombasa, how can they get the access of information, and how will they know that this funding stream exists?
I truly love the conversation. And from morning, one of the resounding voices that the government should provide an enabling environment, and the private sector does what it does better. What I would like to hear from you, and just picking up from like the question of pyrethrum, one of the things was that we were the second largest producer in the globe, and then maybe other crops that are there in terms of farming. So maybe from the panel and the earlier presenters, what can the private sector do to take us back? Like just pick the pyrethrum thing and tell me this is 1, 2, 3, which we think should be done so that we move to the next level. Maybe that conversation, the exact, so that we are not just able to raise the issues, but we also should make exact proposals for government.
Yes, on the question of bus from Homa Bay, we are working with CMA on an implementation plan, and definitely all buses, including yourself, will be equipped with the information, then you can take it to Homa Bay. But we also hope to work with county governments to decentralize what CMA is doing into the different regions of the country. So that is coming with the implementation plan. On pyrethrum, I want to say we are separately working with a company called CAPI. And actually one of the biggest challenges has been the government stopping them from doing a lot of stuff. So luckily a lot of that has been, has been cleared. So I think help is on the way, and they're actually getting additional investors to come in, and they've also gotten into big export markets. So I can see light at the end of the tunnel. But I can tell you the parastatal that is there has been an obstacle. So talk of swimming upstream, government. And these are the things we need to work on together. Thank you.
Very quick response to the two questions. The first one is on the gentleman from Homa Bay. Now, one, we have technology these days, and we can and require you to submit certain documentation, so then we can progress. And if you need to come to Nairobi, then we will communicate that. We are currently working on what we call crowdfunding, which is raising capital through online platforms, so long as you present your case well, and you will have people who will be willing to support you. Those regulations are already with Treasury. I think they have transitioned to the AG's office before they, and then finally we can have the regulations in place. But in the meantime, we can still support you. Just approach us. We can have a discussion on how that can be done. Now, on commodities, CMA has a mandate to regulate the commodity markets in Kenya, be it coffee, pyrethrum, maize, whichever other product. But that is a recent development. I have to be honest that first we have to fix our politics. There's a lot of political interference in our commodity markets, be it maize, be it coffee, sugar, name them. So ultimately, we will need to sort out the way we approach, our sustainability as a country insofar as our commodities are concerned, before we can now take the next steps to take pyrethrum to where it was. I can tell you for a fact, for coffee, CMA has come in very heavy, and who have been, reading the news, there has been some discussion around enabling farmers to market their products, their coffee. And some farmers have already started benefiting from marketing coffee, out there, and they're getting the benefits, and they're happy. So for pyrethrum, I think a few things will be happening in due course. Working with the National Treasury, now that you're the one who's commenting here, hopefully we'll be making some progress over time.
I grew up picking pyrethrum. I'm not sure we need government to interfere in it. We need private sector finding a market, growing it, selling it. Government will follow.